Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Neller. I am a certified insight coach, and joining me today is Lauren Dixon, who is a licensed professional counselor. And we're here today to talk about personality. And because Lauren and I are in the helping profession, we're both very interested in psychology and human behavior. And we wanted to chat with you a little bit about personality today. We're going to focus a tiny bit on the Enneagram, and then if you have any questions, let us know. So with that, and welcome, Lauren. Thanks for joining me. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun and short and sweet. So those of you out there listening, we're not going to take a lot of your time this Sunday afternoon. The first question I want to ask you, Lauren, is what is personality?
Yeah, so personality is one of my favorite things, I think, to talk about, because one of the entry points when we're trying to understand ourselves, our behaviors and feelings, and how all of those things interact. And I think personality is really when we start to unpack how we have learned to adapt to the environment around us and to try and get our needs met and pursue our wants and needs and goals and passions as best as possible based on the people around us, what they have modeled to us. We are learning as we grow up about how do I ask for my needs, what are the ways that are going to help me get those met. And so personality, I used to think of a lot of times as like ego psychology, of really understanding that our ego is the part of our psyche or our experience that is seeking to get our needs met and to interact with the people and the circumstances around us to keep us safe, to keep us happy, to avoid and minimize pain, and to pursue the things that are really important to us.
Excellent definition of personality. So you and I have been really interested in the Enneagram and have been studying it for a while. You've been studying it for over a decade. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about what it is and what the benefits are of studying the Enneagram.
Yeah, so the Enneagram, it's actually a really complex philosophy that digs into ego psychology. A lot of people, I think, have seen it or had some exposure to it through social media, or it's become really popular in a lot of church culture over the last 5 years. And we think of it, I think, a lot of times as just another personality typing system. But the thing that I really felt so drawn to about the Enneagram when I first encountered it is that it's this very dynamical, complex system where there's a lot of room for growth and movement and development depending on our stress levels and our resources and how much support we have around us or even internally as we navigate stressors. So the Enneagram, I think, is really attractive to a lot of people when they initially encounter it because it has this really beautiful way of reflecting some of the dominant motivations that tend to drive behavior, as well as some of the dominant fears that tend to drive behavior. And so a lot of times we initially see some of the behaviors reflected in the Enneagram and we think, oh, that sounds a lot like me. I tend to be really perfectionistic or achievement oriented or high energy or none of those things. And because we see that reflection, it tends to pique an interest of, could I connect with something here that helps me feel more understood and not alone, and also gives some background to why do I do the things that I do? Why do I push so hard with energy in the way that I tend to, especially when that's different from how other people tend to? So I think being able to have that reflection is often a really helpful starting point for not necessarily identifying like how do I act or what am I like, but going one step deeper of why do I act the ways that I do, and why are the things that feel so intense for me personalized to me? What are the things that I care about? What are the things that I worry about that tend to drive some of the ways that I show up in the world and try to get my needs met.
Cool. Tell me, describe what your personality is like.
Yeah. So again, the Enneagram is just one way of, it's one lens or template of being able to understand personality. I think for me, some of the things that I've found really helpful to kind of understand my own personality is that I really, really value integrity, and I really value things being done as well as possible to avoid any kind of pain or suffering. So I think there's sort of a thought process a lot of times under the surface in my mind of, if this gets done really well, it avoids the risk of there being a problem or a consequence or some kind of suffering. And so sometimes that can come across as maybe perfectionistic or a little high strung in the sense of like, this is how it should be, or like, why would we not do it this way if, you know, I could see it or conceptualize it in an ideal manner. And so a label that I really identify with from the Enneagram is just the reformer, somebody who wants to bring reform to systems or relationships or the world or the self, and really pursue how could things be better so that we can embrace more joy and connection, and avoid pain and suffering, which, you know, sometimes is a really helpful thing, and other times pain and suffering is going to be a reality and we need a lot of grace too. So I think that the benefit is not just being able to understand, oh, this is how my personality is, but also being able to understand where sometimes that's actually not helpful for me, and taking a step back and sort of just grounding in, not everybody sees the world this way, and not everybody is looking at this value as the highest priority, and that's okay. And sometimes I can actually be more relational and more connected when I take a step back from my personality in that way. But for contrast, Lisa, how would you describe your personality?
Oh gosh. So I'm just gonna use some of the words from the Enneagram, which would be peacemaker. Like for me, I'm what you would call really laid back. In fact, my husband would say I'm too laid back. And I am motivated really by a desire for harmony. I do not like conflict, so I tend to go along with people and agree with people, and I tend to sort of hide some of my desires for what I really want and what I believe is the right thing, just so that I can avoid conflict at any cost. Yeah.
Well, and I have shared with people too, because for anyone who doesn't know, I grew up with Lisa. She's my mother. And I think our personalities are really complementary in a lot of ways, because one of the things I've learned that is really a gift to me as such a reformer, as somebody who's always looking for how can things be the best way that they could be, is people who can bring a lot of grace and a lot of softness and compassion. And so I think being able to be met with more of that, let's pursue harmony and everything's okay. And, you know, sometimes people could meet my intensity with like a, please calm down and stop being so critical. So I think that's another cool thing with, you know, Enneagram language, is being able to look at how do these different qualities really complement each other and help us move towards growth and awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So what would you tell people is the difference really between studying the Enneagram and like doing a Myers-Briggs test or a DISC profile or something like that?
Yeah, I think those who are interested in personality psychology find a lot of fascination in many of the different typing systems. And I think there's benefits in a lot of them. The thing that I find so valuable with Enneagram, in contrast to a lot of the other popular typing systems, is that there's so much more complexity and room for movement, whereas like Myers-Briggs and DISC, they tend to reflect to us. They kind of do that first step of here are some reflections of maybe some stagnant traits that you might identify with. So it might be helpful for me to share with someone, I tend to be more of an introvert or more of an extrovert, or I tend to be more sensing versus perceiving, or more of an achiever versus more of a harmonizer. But I think the Enneagram takes it a few steps further of looking at, okay, if those are traits you identify with, how come? What drives that underneath? Where did you sort of learn the initial messages that those would be helpful things for you? And of course, some of it is just our own natural temperament. Some of it is, it's just nature versus nurture, and it's all complex. The Enneagram, though, it gives a lot of guidance as far as how can I integrate this knowledge, it actually not to understand more of who I am, but to understand that I'm not actually these things. These are ego archetypes. These are ways that I show up to get my needs met or to cope with pain and suffering. And I think there's actually something really spiritual about being able to separate our ego from just our true sense of being. And so that's where I think, we find a lot more depth in the Enneagram because there's so much space for understanding and movement in our own development. And B, the Enneagram traditionally is taught in a community setting. So it's meant to be very community-based. And so versus just having a, bullet list of here are traits that you identify with versus traits that I identify with, it really is meant to bring us into discussion and into collaboration of really trying to understand some of our differences and similarities and where we can have some more compassion and grace with each other, as well as where we can bring our different strengths to support each other.
I love that you said that because you and I have a course coming up where we do exactly that. And I hadn't really thought about it before of being in community, but it makes such a difference when you can discuss what's going, what you're learning, and then also what not to hold on to, like maybe the negative parts of your personality or whatever, to understand that there's grace in all of that. And that's a message that keeps coming through community. So Lauren and I are actually offering a course on the Enneagram. There's lots of ways you can learn about the Enneagram. You can read books about it. You can listen to podcasts about it. But being in community, that's so cool. So we're offering an Enneagram course, and we would love for you to inquire about that. We have a flyer that we'd like to share with you. And if you are interested, just find me on Facebook. So Lisa.Neller, and it's Kneller. So if you find me on Facebook and you message me with your email address, I will send you the PDF, the flyer. I can send it also through Facebook Messenger. If you're not on Facebook, try me on Instagram and we'll get connected. We have a few spaces left for this class. It starts January 27th. And like I said, we'd love for you to join us and to be in community learning about the Enneagram. So with that, Lauren and I are going to sign off. Thanks, Lauren. And this was fun. And have fun learning about your personality.
Bye.
Bye-bye.